All right. Yeah, look, excited about what we were able to get accomplished tonight. I think, a lot of times you get into these drafts and sometimes a position of need and best available player don't always match up. We felt like tonight was a great situation for us, and that we felt like, offensive tackle was a position of need for us. Uh, and we felt like we had a really good player on the board that was available to us at that point in time. Um, and yet I think that was something that we kind of knew going into the draft that, um, that it was a pretty deep group of offensive tackles, and so we felt good. There's a handful of guys that we felt, really good about uh, as potentials at that pick. So um, really excited about Taliese. I think he's big, he's athletic, he's extremely physical. Um, I think he I think he's a culture builder type personality, um, and I think obviously we liked what we saw on the tape. And then we sat down and had an interview with him at the combine and really fell in love with him because we just felt like he was our type of person.
Does his experience, like in the wide zone scheme, does that make it easy to kind of project how he would fit into this?
Well, yeah, but um, I think every team to some extent runs a version of the wide zone. And and look, there's a lot of teams in college football that are running, zone scheme blocking. So, um, yeah, but obviously we were able to see him do it, and I just think he's a tough physical player, and I think that's something that um, that's what we want to be as a football team. And I think, if you want to be that as a football team, it kind of starts up front with your offensive and defensive lines, and I think he'll bring that demeanor to our group.
As a
Obviously,
player, did the tackles kind of play out the way you thought they would ahead of you?
You know, um, you never really know how it's going to play out. And like I said, there was a handful of guys that we really liked, um, and we felt like they were all very comparable and very close in terms of um, talent level, and so they were all graded, pretty closely, and so we felt like there was a good chance that we'd have one or two of them looking at us at 14, and obviously with six quarterbacks going off the board, it pushed a couple other position players down to us. So um, I think we were fortunate in that regard.
Do you envision him on the left side, the right side, kind of two?
Yeah, look, I think this. I think, look, he's an offensive tackle. I know he can play right. Um, I feel very confident that he can go over and play on the left-hand side. Um, I don't think that's a decision that we have to make right now. I think we see how the rest of the draft plays out. I think we see how, um, there's always a little bit of a free agent period, after the draft where some guys become available. So I think um, we know he's going to play offensive tackle, and I feel like he's going to be a pretty good one for us.
there was
So you
talk
don't
of
see
him
him.
possibly being a guard at this level or being projected as a guard at this level. That obviously doesn't sound like you're.
Yeah, that's not where we're going to start out. Look, I think he can play. Only position that I'm not quite sure whether he plays is center, but I think he can play, either side and have some inside outside flex.
Dennis, did you guys consider moving back at all?
Well, look, we considered a lot of different things, um, and yet you kind of have to see how the draft plays out and what's available to you when you get to your pick, and um, if your guy's there that you really, really want, it doesn't make a lot of sense to back up. So there was a scenario, that where we potentially could have backed up a spot or two, um, but that didn't play out.
You mentioned sort of his culture building mentality. What was it about your conversation with him, or maybe
Yeah, look, I think he's kind of a guy's guy, and I think he's got kind of a tough guy demeanor to him, and I think, I think that's something that we can use, up front. I mean, I think he was one of the more mature people that we talked to. I mean, I think, yeah, I think he's a grown man, and I think that's good for that position.
Obviously, it would be kind of dangerous to say we're going to fill this in the draft, but I mean, did this affect any decisions in free agency, thinking you guys had a pretty good shot at getting a tackle in the draft?
Well, look, I mean, I think all those things are factors that you take into account. Obviously, look, with free agency happening before the draft, like, you have no idea what's going to happen in the draft. So, but yet at the same time, we did feel like, as you go through free agency and you're looking at how you're going to fill out your team, if you didn't feel like there was an offensive tackle, if it wasn't deep in the draft, then we may have been a little bit more aggressive in free agency. But yet, we felt like it was a deep position and didn't feel like we had to force anything, early on in free agency.
Is a defensive guy, were you kind of surprised that first 14 picks were offense, and was there like consideration to say, I mean, I know you got your guy, but just kind of a lot of good defensive players are still on the board?
Yeah. Well, look, when you have 6 quarterbacks go, in the first, and we knew it was, kind of thought, there's a good chance Bowers might go up there in that area, and we knew there was a lot of offensive linemen that were going to go. So I don't know that I was shocked, and yet I would say that's a little unusual.
Did you end up with a cloud that had, like, as you were nearing your pick, that had a Bowers and an edge rusher and an offensive tackle, or I mean?
I'm not going to get into exactly how the board was, but yet yeah, Brock Bowers was a consideration for us, and the fact that he got, all the way to pick 13, wasn't it? Right? So he got all the way to 13. So I mean, there was certainly some discussion going on.
So, but meaning that it wasn't all like tunnel vision, like we're gonna take the best tackle on our board. Like it certainly, if Fuaga goes 13, it might have ended up differently, or?
Yeah,
Position-wise.
absolutely could have, yeah.
DA, the other day, Mickey, I think, said there were still a couple of musts maybe on the roster you all needed. I mean, is it fair to characterize tackle? I mean, is this a must for you all?
Yeah, I think it certainly was a must. Obviously, Ram's situation is a little bit up in the air. We still feel confident in Trevor Penning, and yet it's still an unproven commodity. So James Hurst retiring, this is something that we kind of expected and knew was coming. And so, look, we knew that was going to be a position that we were going to need to, try to address in the draft. And fortunate for us, like I said, when we started this, it's not all too often that, the depth of the draft and the position of need really marry up, but this happened to be a year that it married up for us.
What is it about Tally that really makes him versatile to play on both sides of the ball? Both
Excuse-
sides of the line, I'm sorry.
What's that?
His ability to play on either side, what about that, his game itself, just the confidence that he can play right?
Yeah, look, I think, he's an extremely good athlete for his size, and he's got outstanding feet and body control, really good balance, and so, and look, the biggest difference, I don't know that we put nearly as much stock into the left tackle versus the right tackle. So probably the biggest difference is just right-handed stance versus a left-handed stance. But yeah, I see those positions being a lot more similar, because the best pass rushers, used to always be on the right-hand side. So it wasn't always about the blind side of the quarterback. It was the best pass rusher. Now, that typically ended up being on the blind side of the quarterback, but the best pass rusher was over there on the right, and so you needed your best protector over there. I don't know that I necessarily see it that way all the time anymore. And, teams are moving, their rushers around and not really lining them up in one spot all the time. So right and left really is probably a little bit overrated in my mind.
Did the uncertainty or the not knowing or maybe even expecting Ryan Ramczyk not being available make right tackle even? I mean, maybe that would have affected strategy if you knew Ryan Ramczyk was locked in at right tackle.
Yeah, might have affected in terms of where the initial lineup would be, but I don't know that necessarily affected any more so the need for a tackle.
Taliese said that it was a bit of a surprise. There wasn't a ton of communication over maybe the last month or so. Is that a product of being comfortable in the scouting early on?
When you identify somebody early on that everybody in your building loves on tape, and then you get a chance to go and see them at the combine, and you interview them, and you get a chance to talk to them, you feel comfortable with the mental and the learning ability. There's not really, once you feel comfortable with it, it's not like you have to go through a lot longer process. And so, look, a lot of times when you have a clean prospect, there's not a lot of holes that you're trying to fill in the blanks. You're better served spending your time trying to, find out some other things about some other players once you feel like you're pretty confident that you found a guy that fits your culture and what you want to do.
How long did you know that James Hurst was going to retire, and how much did that further propel the need to get offensive line?
Yeah, I don't know exactly when that was, but we've known for a while that was going to be the case. So that's kind of been, in our plans for a while.
When 3 tackles go in the first 10 picks, do you start to get nervous as it gets closer, hoping the guy's there? Or?
Well, did you get nervous? Yeah, look, I mean, you have guys that you kind of target that you really like and that you think are going to be there for your pick. And, in particular, when they start, taking other guys at that position, it's kind of the next man up. So, yeah, you get a little bit nervous, but there were some good players on the board. And so did I go into this thinking, hey, there's a good chance we take a tackle at 14 and would feel really good about it? Yes. Did I feel like we had to take a tackle or else? No, because there were some other good players, and so that's how the draft goes. And like I said before, that it just married up for us this year, and it was good.
You kind of touched upon this before, but 15 minutes is such a short time at the combine to kind of speak to him in an interview. Was there something he said or in that meeting that you really remember?
Yeah, look, I think I just fell in love with the personality. I just fell in love with, I didn't feel like this player was sitting in front of me trying to sell me something that he wasn't. I felt a genuine person. And I just felt like he was a man's man, guy's guy, dude's dude, however you want to call it, and I like that, and then when I take that and then I put on the tape and I watch him play and the way that he plays, the physicality with which he plays, I thought it was a pretty good fit.
Is that, I think you call him a top SOB, is that more in like his run blocking, his passing, where you kind of see that?
I see it in all aspects of his game. Yeah.
Is there any aspect of his game that you're hoping maybe he takes, another step forward throughout training camp and everything?
Well, look, I mean, I think his physicality is great. I think, look, probably with a lot of these guys, they're probably a little further developed in terms of the run game. So I think still working on his pass protection, but I think he's a pretty polished player. So, look, anybody that we draft has things that they have to work on and things that they have to be better at. But I think he's pretty good in a lot of areas.
This team has obviously never been afraid to trade out, but was there any sense this year that you were hoping to hold on to the picks since you have less capital than usual to work with?
Well, yeah, and yet, if a player that you highly covet is in a position that you can go get him, and you're maybe concerned that somebody else might be able to get that player before you, I think that's always something that you have to consider. And so, but again, like I kind of said from the outset, we felt like there was going to be a run on receivers. We felt like there was going to be a run on quarterbacks. I didn't think it'd be 6. And then we felt like there was going to be, a run on tackles, and we felt like there was a handful of them that we liked, and then you throw in a couple of defensive players that we felt like could go in the top, 10 to 12 picks. We didn't feel like there was a sense that, man, we better go up. And then as you watch the draft happen, you feel a little bit more confident that some of those players are going to be there.
Let me ask you
Along the
about-
similar
get ahead
lines
of-
of that,
Go ahead.
the scenario you mentioned about trading back, did another team call when you guys were on the clock and present that, or is that something you were just exploring before the board fell away?
Yeah, as not when we were on the clock, but shortly before we were going to be on the clock, there were some teams that were looking to potentially move up, and so and then as we got on the clock, we decided we're going to sit here and take our pick.
Mickey was saying yesterday or Tuesday that sometimes when you go back, that you risk that it's like too far back where you missed a player. What kind of the offers that you received, maybe that too far back range?
Well, look, yeah, there were some that were pretty close and some that were a little further back. And again, when it got time and we were on the clock and it was ready for us to pick, there's really not any sense screwing around. Got the guy you like. It's in a position of need. Let's don't overthink this. Let's take the player, and that's what we did.
You, just looking ahead to tomorrow, I think a few years ago, Mickey said that he felt like there was like a top 20 and then there was like 20 through 50 grouping. Picking at 45, do you feel like there's still a lot of really good players that you all be able to potentially get?
Yeah, look, we'll obviously, when I get done here, we'll go up and kind of look at the board a little bit more, and we'll do a little bit of that tomorrow. But yeah, I mean, I think we got 13th pick tomorrow, so there's going to be 12 players that are going to go off the board before we get an opportunity to pick, unless we do something. So we'll see where that's at, and but there's some good players still left.
And I had a follow-up question. You referenced it a couple of times. You've been doing this a long time. Is there a moment on any team that you kind of all look at each other and go, wow, I can't believe that happened? If you want to read between the lines on that, you can.
Yeah, look, there's always picks that are kind of surprising to you, and so, but I think I just focus a little bit more on what we need to do and how we need to improve our team.
Atlanta will make things interesting for you as a defensive coach, scouting 2 new quarterbacks on their team this year.
Yeah, look, I mean, we'll see how that goes, but I don't think that's anything that's kind of uncommon. I mean, we've seen that, throughout the league. You have a quarterback and you draft a young guy and give him an opportunity to come in and sit and develop. So nothing really shocks me too much.
Dennis, I'm sure that you're drafting a guy at 14th overall. There's a lot of tape you like on a player, but is there anything in particular that just really stood out, like a particular game where you're like, wow, that's...
Well, I don't know if I want to say a particular game, but I mean, they're like, again, I've said this. I just think like his play temperament, the toughness and the violence that he plays the game at, that really caught my eye. And being able to do that at a high level of competition, I thought was impressive. And then you go and look, here's a guy that knows he's going to be call it a top 15, top 20 tackle. And he goes to the Senior Bowl and he competes in the Senior Bowl. That doesn't happen very often. But that tells me a lot about the player and his willingness to go out and compete regardless of the circumstances. So that was impressive to me.
When you guys take Penning a few years ago and take tackle there, and he doesn't acknowledging that his development so like it doesn't maybe pan out the way that you guys want. Is there anything that you use from that process to inform you looking for a tackle this time around, or is there anything that you take from that that you learned from?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, you're always evaluating, you know, what you did well, what you didn't do well. And look, I'm at a position right now with Trevor Penning where I'm excited about seeing where he can go. I'm not worried about, you know, where he's at right now. I'm thinking about where he can be, and I think this guy is a very talented player. I think he can be a really good player in our league. And I think he's been slowed by some development and injuries. And so, yeah, I mean, are there things there's things, yeah, there's obviously things that you learn, but I'm at a point right now where I feel like this guy's I'm still excited about the prospect.
Yeah, I guess I just mean like when you're looking at Fuaga, like you hear this notion of like Fuaga specifically being like a plug and play tackle, but you could also look at the scouting reports or the analysis at Penning at the time. And that would
Yeah, and I think each one of these are different situations. You know, you got a guy that played in the Power 5 conference versus a small school guy. There's more development that happens in that type of area. So I think each one's, you know, kind of a totally different situation.
Yeah, no, I know you're still in the middle of it, but what's the draft process been like with the new offensive staff? I mean, it's been stimulating to some degree or invigorating in any way with new ideas and fresh kind of way of looking at things?
Yeah. Yeah, it has been. I mean, the process itself hasn't changed. But obviously, you know, new scheme, kind of new philosophy. And so with that maybe comes a little bit of a change in the type of player that you're looking for. So it's been good to go through that process. You know, obviously, look, there's a learning curve that goes along with this. Like I listen to and hear what these coaches have to say in terms of players, and yet I don't know exactly where they're at as evaluators until you kind of go through the process and you start to learn as you go through. And obviously, we're biased, so the more they see it the same way I do, the more I think they're a better evaluator, and vice versa, I guess. So, but yeah, look, I think it's been fun. It's been exciting to see these guys come in, the way they've worked, the way they've really tried to be detailed in everything that they're doing. And look, I can't wait. We're going to start football school on Monday, so it'll be really kind of the first time that we've really had an opportunity really to meet with the players and kind of get into the schematics of what we're going to do.
There were some early kind of critical evaluations of Fuaga based on his arm length, and I'm just curious about how much stock do you really put in something like that when it's a reasonable disparity from what the ideal prototype might be?
Yeah, well, I would say he's not as short lengthwise as maybe the way you're describing it to me. I don't know what, I mean, obviously, look, anybody can use whatever prototypes they want to use. We've got our standards that we think, is prototype in our league. And yeah, his arms are a little shorter than maybe we would like. So if we want to punch a hole, let's punch that hole. But yet, there's good players that maybe don't have quite the length, and so I didn't see that. There's times where you watch it and you say you see it on tape and you see where it's a problem. And then there's times where you're like, I don't really think that's, a factor. And look, all these players have things that, negatives, I'll call them, right? But it's like, can they overcome those deficiencies? And he's certainly been able to do it.
Just to be clear too, when you mentioned that there are times where you watch it and you can see it, and there are times where you watch it and you don't necessarily see it, are you saying that there's times on his tape where you see
I'm saying more or less when I'm watching players and you see a lack of length show up, not this player in particular, I would say I don't really see it show up as much on his tape.